Those of you who are just joining, we are streaming this to the YouTube channel and we're recording this just for your awareness. We're going to get started in just a minute. We've got a few more folks I'm expecting to join. All right, Mr. Chairman, we have all but one of our members here. I expect the last one will come in any minute now. So if you'd like to go ahead and call us to order, I can go through the logistics and then we can do a roll call, if that's okay.
Thank you, Charles. So for the official record, I call to order the first meeting of the Finance Advisory Group of the Climate Initiative Task Force. Today is Tuesday, December the 8th, 2020. And it is 1:02 by my watch. So I will turn it over to Charles Sutcliffe of the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities for brief meeting logistics rundown and roll call.
Great, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for being here. Just very quickly, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. Please leave your camera on as much as possible and be present in this meeting while you're here with us. I think it'd be easier for everybody, including the public, to kind of identify who's speaking, what kind of point of view you're bringing to the table. If you could include your affiliation somehow in your Zoom name. Again, to kind of keep things, minimize distractions, if we could stay on mute unless you have something to offer, that would be great. And then I want to try to keep the chat function just for technical hiccups. So if something's not working for you or something's happening, you can use the chat. But if you have any kind of question, please just verbalize it for the group so we can all kind of benefit from it and so that the public can kind of follow the conversation as well. And then just if possible, hold questions to the end of an agenda item or a section. We have a few breaks included for questions. And then obviously in the event of a Zoom bomb or something like that, we will terminate this meeting and look for a time to reschedule it. So that's going to be our protocol there. And then for the public, we are holding this meeting on Zoom, and then the public is able to watch over a YouTube channel we've created. The public can submit comments via an email to us at climate@la.gov at any time. Please include this in the subject line of the email, this meeting that you're speaking to, and if possible, the agenda item or the contents that you want to address. And we will take those up at the end of the meeting. And so that's what I have now. I'm gonna put this agenda slide up, Brad. I guess I'll go straight into roll call if that's all right.
That would be great, Charles.
Okay, so Brad Lambert,
Here.
Dr. Stephen Barnes,
Here.
Camille Conway,
I'm here.
Pierre Connor,
Here.
Stephanie Ferry,
Here.
Alejandra Guzman,
Here.
Michael Jackson. Let's see. Okay. Vic Lafond,
I'm here.
Brandon Nelson,
Here.
Dr. Jim Richardson,
Here.
and Jeff Schwartz.
Here.
Great, thank you, everybody. We have a quorum.
All right, in our first official order of business, we need to formally adopt today's agenda. If you haven't already, we can see it on the screen. Please take a quick look at it, and I am happy to accept a motion and a second to proceed.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Richardson.
Second. Pierre Connor.
Hey, Pierre, thank you very much. Pierre Connor with the second. All in favor, if you could indicate by saying aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. So thank you very much. We are off and running. And let me just say how much I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. I'm going to start really by offering a handful of thanks. And that first thanks is really to all the members who have agreed to serve. They volunteered to serve on this advisory group. I want to emphasize how much we appreciate your generosity with your time and your expertise. I look forward to working with you in the coming months and seeing what we can accomplish together. If anyone has any ideas or concerns regarding the conduct of this advisory group, please know that you can reach out to me at any time. And again, I'm Brad Lambert. I am the Deputy Secretary at Louisiana Economic Development. Second, thanks to members of the viewing public who have joined us this afternoon. I'm guessing most of us, especially with a meeting like this, we all wish we could be meeting in person, but our public health challenges require us to conduct our business virtually, at least for the time being. We certainly encourage all interested individuals and entities to follow along as best you can. And as Charles has already indicated, near the end of today's meeting, there will be an opportunity, even through this virtual medium, an opportunity for public comment. And as he said, public comment is going to be done for the time being via email. Send an email to the email address climate@la.gov. It's all lowercase, climate@la.gov. In the subject line, include Finance Advisory Group, and please include your name and your address in that comment as well. And we will capture those and enter those into the record at the end of the meeting. We know these meetings are being recorded, and we also have some note takers that are trying to capture relevant items as well. And I will try to do my best each meeting to be clear about where we are in the agenda, where we're going, to allow folks to follow along as easily and as seamlessly as possible. And lastly, I want to thank in advance, I want to thank Charles and his team at the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities. We know we're going to need to lean on them for support as we attempt to really stay on track here and make progress on our tasks and our functions. Certainly me, as a representative of LED, Louisiana Economic Development, feel very privileged to have a seat at this new effort, the Climate Initiatives Task Force, and I hope to meet everyone's expectations as the chair of this particular advisory group. We take seriously our responsibility to participate in a thoughtful process to identify opportunities can both grow our economy and be more protective of the environment. And so we'll attempt to advise the overall task force, certainly to the best of our abilities. I strongly believe these two dual purposes can be achieved as we enter an era of developing and advancing technology amid this urgency to act. And certainly my ultimate hope is for this work to carefully evaluate, collaborate, and formulate continued success for the economy with corresponding success for the environment. On this advisory group, I believe Charles and his team, we've assembled a very diverse and experienced group of thought leaders from higher education, local government, the financial community, and our regional economic development organizations. Please know that your viewpoints and your input are welcome and encouraged. Basically, I think after we have member introductions here in just 1 second, Charles is going to really begin to move through the meat of the agenda and the overall process for the climate task force. I certainly don't want to bias anyone about that, but let me close by just saying that I think one of the primary functions of our advisory group will be to put the ideas, suggestions, and recommendations that come our way through a handful of prisms. We're essentially going to need to filter all these ideas and put them through an economic prism, put them through a financial prism, and perhaps even a political prism to really provide a reality check on the benefits and costs of these ideas and whether or not they can be realistically achieved by a certain time frame, while also meeting this dual test, reducing the worst impacts of climate change while preserving our economic competitiveness. I think this is going to be an incredibly intellectually stimulating journey, and I am very excited to take it with all of you. So again, I'll start real quick with an introduction of myself. I'm Brad Lambert. I am the Deputy Secretary at Louisiana Economic Development. I'm finishing up my fourth year at LED, and before that, the entire prior 24 years of my career was spent at a public and governmental affairs firm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Harris DeVille and Associates. We represented a pretty diverse range of clients, and a lot of them operated in this intersection of the economy and the environment. So with that, Charles, I don't know if we want to, you kind of prompt each one of us to give a brief introduction. So thank you guys very much.
Sure. Thanks, Brad. That was a great intro. I'll just go down the roll and just ask everybody that way to kind of make sure everybody gets their turn and do it that way. So Stephen Barnes, you're up first.
All right. Thank you. I'm Stephen Barnes. I am the director of the Kathleen Blanco Public Policy Center at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and also an associate professor of economics in the Moody College of Business there. In addition, I serve as the independent economist on the state's Revenue Estimating Conference, where I strive tirelessly to fulfill the lofty expectations set by Jim Richardson, who we'll hear from in a minute, for the role on that committee. And I've done work, a good bit of work related to the economics of Louisiana's coastal challenges and looking at long-term environmental changes, and done work across a variety of other sectors, focusing on the state's economy over the last decade or so.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Camille Conaway.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the Vice President for Policy at the Louisiana Community and Technical College System. I've been in this role for about 6 months. Prior to that, I was in the private sector for 10 years, 7 years at the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, where I focused on policy research largely related to workforce development and the economy. I look forward to serving. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Pierre Connor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Charles and Brad. I'm Pierre Connor. I'm the executive director of the Tulane Energy Institute and a professor of practice in the A.B. Freeman School of Business. I've been here for about a year and a half. Prior to that, my career has been in capital markets, and so my expertise is in finance and capital markets, equity markets in particular, and prior to that in energy operations. I have had experience working in nonprofit roles at the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. As well, I'm very interested in K through 8 education and a charter school board here in New Orleans. And very much look forward to talking about how we can make sustainable change, that I believe is at the intersection of just the topics we're discussing, policy and markets and economics. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Stephanie Ferry.
Thank you. Stephanie Ferry. I'm a managing director with Raymond James. I work exclusively with, for the most part, Louisiana issuers when they are accessing the capital markets, either through taxable or tax-exempt debt. I also have significant experience working with a variety of tax credits, whether it's new market tax credits, low-income tax credits, historic tax credits, a whole host of credits there. By and large, just working with issuers and nonprofits when they are accessing capital for projects. I have worked either with Raymond James or its predecessors here in Louisiana for virtually all of my career, and have been in the securities industry for about 30 years. Very much also looking forward to working with this group and helping to see how Louisiana can move forward in this area. I was telling one of the fellow committee members earlier today that it is an area that the municipal market has focused on significantly over the past several years, what's called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And it's a buzzword that is not going away. So I think it's very timely that the state is looking at this, and I look forward to participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Alejandra Guzman.
Good afternoon, everybody. Alejandra Guzman. I currently serve as Vice President for Real Estate and Capital Investments at the New Orleans Business Alliance, which is the local economic development organization in partnership with the City of New Orleans. Before that, I worked for 15 years in the construction and real estate industries in Mexico, very much so focused on policy initiatives, community initiatives, and business development initiatives as well. Tulane brought me to New Orleans. I finished a master's degree here. I later stayed to marry a New Orleanian, and my young daughter was born here. So this type of initiatives are near and dear to my heart. I look very much forward to collaborating with all of you and serving in this capacity. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Michael Jackson.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Jackson, and I am currently the Chief Diversity Officer for Bernard Capital Partners, a private equity firm, and formerly a Louisiana state legislator from 2000 to 2012, practicing attorney, and was general counsel to a healthcare organization in Baton Rouge, and I'm looking forward to the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vic Lafond.
Yes, my name is Vic Lafond. I'm the President, Executive Director, President, CEO of the South Louisiana Economic Council. I'm one of the 8 regional EDOs across the state, servicing and representing the Bayou parishes of Assumption, Lafourche, Terrebonne, and St. Mary. I've been at this post for 30 years now. I'm a product of this region, and also grew up with the climate and the challenges that the coast has been faced with. I'm also the administrator of the newly created Coastal Technical Institute Center here at Nichols, housed on the Nichols campus, which has also been named the coastal campus here in the South, but also the Coastal Studies Center as well. So we have an intense interest in climate and the coast, and it's part of our DNA. So I'm glad to be here and very much look forward to serving and to learn a lot.
Thank you, Vic. Brandon Nelson.
Thank you. My name is Brandon Nelson. I'm a senior VP over at Hancock Whitney Bank, where I've been for 20 years. I manage the commercial banking New Orleans team. I'm currently the chair of CCRE, which is the Coalition for Coastal Resilience and Economy, which is under the GNO Inc. Umbrella. And essentially, we're a business-led coalition that was formed to educate, inform, and frankly, advocate for the sustainable restoration efforts for the Louisiana wetlands and coasts and rivers. So that's the capacity that I'm here in, and I look forward to assisting.
Thank you, Brandon. Dr. Richardson.
Jim Richardson. I'm a alumni professor of economics and public administration at LSU in Baton Rouge. I served the state in a number of capacities, first being a member of the Revenue Estimating Conference for 32 years. I've worked with the legislature on various tax proposals. I've worked with LED on various economic development proposals. I've worked with people in the chemical industry, the oil and gas industry, the tourist industry, and the gaming industries. I've worked for various local governments like the city of New Orleans for a few projects as well. And so I have seen different areas, different sectors of the Louisiana economy up close. And I'm very anxious because this is a very important issue that we have to do our part. Unfortunately, we cannot solve it by ourselves, though.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. And Jeff Schwartz.
Last but not least, hi everyone, Jeff Schwartz. I currently serve as the Director of Economic Development for the City of New Orleans. I've been in this role for about 15 months, so timing is everything. Under my watch, I think we've had 3.5 disasters, if I'm counting correctly. Prior to that, I helped found a community economic development nonprofit that worked in real estate and urban planning for about 11 years. I'm extremely interested in the intersection of finance and the built environment and how that relates to the plight and opportunities that face Southeast Louisiana. So I'm very happy to be here amongst such a talented roster of individuals trying to take advantage of some of the opportunities that face us. So thank you for having me and looking forward to collaborating with you all.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and everybody else. This is a great group ahead of us. Brad, if it's all right with you, I'll go ahead and move into the next agenda item where we kind of start to outline some of the topics for the day.
Please do so, Charles. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for those introductions. I think we've got a really terrific group here, and we can really try to accomplish some needed and productive things over the next 14 months.
Definitely. So everyone, I'm just going to quickly kind of give you a broad outline of what we're going to try to accomplish today, so you can kind of have the big picture before I jump into the little things. So I'm going to start with an overview of the executive order and kind of how the problem's been defined for us, what the context is for all this discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about the overall task force, the structure and the deliverables that are expected out of that group. And then we'll get into a discussion about our specific advisory group. What is our role? What is our charge? How I want this group to kind of have a discussion and help make sure we shape that so that it's as covering all the bases. And then we'll have again we'll jump back into a few more background slides on the planning process we're using. It's a process called structured decision making, and then we'll have another discussion with the membership about how we can help shape that process with our expertise that's here in this room. And then we'll end with some next steps and some things like that. So to kind of start us off, it is important to define the problem that we're setting out to talk about, and the executive order does that in a really also kind of establishes the vision for where the governor wants to see us at the end of this. The vision in the executive order acknowledges two fundamental realities, and then Brad already alluded to these, but one is that Louisiana is extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and must do its part to mitigate those impacts. And the second is that we have a leadership role currently in energy production, industry, agriculture, forestry, transportation, all these different things that must be accounted for economically as we kind of deal with these emissions issues. And then third, I would say, I would just add for this group, just knowing that the status quo is not really a sustainable pathway to be on. I think one of the key contributions of this group here today is going to be to help us navigate the economic side of this dichotomy, help us understand the consequences of inaction as well as the implications of adopting certain policies. So I really appreciate you guys again for helping us in that area. The executive order does set up very specific emissions reductions goals, as you can see here on the screen. Having the goals set from the beginning gives us clear direction on what we're working towards. And these goals are very similar, if not identical, to many of the goals being laid out by corporations across the private sector, including energy companies, chemical companies, utilities, many others. Some other sectors are even going more ambitious than this, but this is not, Louisiana is not alone in adopting these goals. And I would say too, kind of the last part about these goals is that this effort is really a mitigation first effort. We have a coastal master plan, we have a Louisiana watershed initiative, we have another resilience effort that I'm leading. We have a lot of different things going on in the adaptation space. I want this whole effort should be first and foremost addressing greenhouse gas emission mitigation. But that being said, we do want to do as many things right at the same time as we can. So if there are co-benefits to be gained while we adopt certain policies, we definitely want to be grabbing those, but we don't need to feel compelled to also work out any kinds of adaptation strategies as part of this work. And so then too, just a little quickly on the origins of those goals, those emissions reductions goals that were laid out in the executive order. Human activities are already responsible for about 1 degree Celsius of global warming above pre-industrial levels, and the current trend places us at between 1.5 degrees of warming between 2030 and 2052. So the severity of the impacts that we are going to be faced with and our ability to adapt to those impacts is going to be widely different between a 1.5 degree warming and 2 degrees of warming. And so the goals that we were set out in the executive order are really aimed at trying to identify what is the United States and then therefore the Louisiana share of achieving these goals, keeping us below that 2 degrees warming. And of course, Louisiana is it's a global problem, but Louisiana is a contributor, as we all are. We are 8th total in emissions, according to just kind of bulk emissions. So you can see kind of who our peers are on this, just in terms of overall emissions on this chart here. But also, we're also among the top 5 highest emitting states when it comes to our per person and relative to our economy. And so I think this is something that this group is not going to be surprised to see, but part of this is that despite our population size, we are, the rest of the country is depending on the products and the services that Louisiana provides to run the rest of the economy. And so that is very much reflected in our economic base. It's reflected in the jobs that we have here, some of the tax bases, but it's also reflected in our carbon emissions as well. And so there are a lot of big reports that come out on a regular basis, kind of trying to identify how these problems are going to play out in society. And the U.S. National Climate Assessment has produced some key messages for the Southeast region of the United States. And I just wanted to highlight those to kind of start reminding us of what some of the impacts are that we can expect. The first one is that there will be risks for urban infrastructure and for health. This includes rapid population shifts, it includes increasing heat, it includes infrastructure risks from flooding and sea level rise, vector-borne diseases as well as air quality implications. Second one, also, no stranger to Louisiana, is that climate change is going to have increasing flood risks in coastal and low-lying regions. I think we can all identify with that. The third is that natural ecosystems have the potential to be transformed. It's everything from warming winter temperatures, changing fire patterns, rising sea levels, hurricane intensity, drought and extreme rainfall events, and you can have both of those two things happening kind of in the same season. And we're seeing warming ocean temperatures. And then fourth, there are economic and health risks for rural communities in particular. The National Climate Assessment pointed out there are diverse rural regions across, even Louisiana, but also the Southeast region. There are risks to agriculture and forestry. Heat, health, and livelihoods will be impacted, particularly if you have an outdoor job or you're involved in recreational activities. And then there are compounding stresses and constraints that will come to the economy and related to health as people are trying to adapt to the changes. And so again, just to kind of put a finer point on it, why does this matter in Louisiana? We're looking at exacerbating risks to already vulnerable communities, as well as new risks in communities. And these risks will be disproportionately felt among vulnerable and marginalized communities. And then the economic losses that are associated, especially in certain sectors, are very large, and something that we've got to get a handle on. Some of these losses are greater than the GDP of entire states by the end of the century. And then finally, as I don't have to tell the economics group, but all these systems are interconnected, and the cascading impacts are also going to be hard to predict, and they will threaten essential services in ways that we might not be immediately obvious because of these different interconnections. And so with that, I want to kind of start talking about the structure and the task force and what the role is ahead of us. How are we going to, how is Louisiana beginning to kind of confront this this problem, and what's our strategy here? The Climate Initiatives Task Force is our vehicle for kind of entering into this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, the vision is laid out. It includes specific goals, but there are also just values that we want to just kind of raise up as we go through this. This is a contentious, political, fraught concept. There are just lots of different stakeholders, and as we go through this, we want to maintain respect and integrity for everybody that's involved. We want to be transparent. We are doing our best in this COVID world to, be transparent with the public about everything that we're thinking about, talking about, what gets put on the table, what gets left off. And in the end, we want to also take a page out of the coastal playbook, where the more we can maximize the role of science, the more we can kind of keep politics at bay, and the more we can kind of stay focused on what we can do. And we're also aiming to have a consensus-driven process as much as humanly possible, because in the end, we want to be able to implement the strategies that this effort puts forward. We don't want to come up with a bunch of things that are not, someone on this call already mentioned, reality-based or are not achievable. And I think the more that we can kind of confront the difficulties of different policies on the front end, the more success we'll have there. So the task force that the governor established, they've held one meeting already, and we'll be having the next later this month. It's a 23-member group, and we tried our best to kind of touch all the different areas, but we knew that was not enough folks to kind of have, to kind of hear from all the different points of view. So we've got these advisory groups and sector committees that are kind of broadening the conversation so we can bring in more voices and make sure that we're really tackling this issue from every point of view. So generally speaking, the sector committees, which are in blue here, are created for kind of thinking about just sectors of the economy or places where emissions are coming from. So we want them to be able to have really specific conversations about what can be done in their particular sector. And the 4 advisory groups have a slightly different job. We're going to be interacting with both the task force as a whole and the sector committees to offer expertise and ensure that the solutions that we offer are well grounded in science, equity, finance in our case, and law and policy in the legal group. And so in terms of the, more specifically on the roles, as I said, the sector committees are going to be looking at scoping emission sources and sinks within their sector, and they're going to be doing most of the heavy lifting when it comes to developing and evaluating strategies. It's not to say that people in this room can't also have a role in that, but we're really looking to the sector committees to kind of say, like, what can be done in transportation or in utilities or whatever the case may be. The advisory groups are going to be really, just like Brad said at the outset, we're a prism. We want to help evaluate these strategies that are coming from either the public or the sector committees through our subject matter lens. We are there to do that. I think as much as we can do that on the front end, we want to inform these committees before they start their work. Hey guys, this is how we should consider the economy or the workforce or different things as you develop these proposals. But then there will be a formal process that we'll go through where we'll evaluate the strategies that are put forward. And we're also going to be interfacing with the task force as a whole too. So we don't need to be strictly thinking about, well, one sector of the economy at a time, if that's not appropriate. If this group can also kind of be thinking about the issue writ large as well. And then the task force is going to steer the direction of the overall climate initiative and help develop and approve the interim and final reports, which is brings me to my next slide, which is what are the deliverables for the task force. And so there's an interim report that we committed to in the executive order, and we are going to stick with that despite all the hurricanes and the delays that we had this summer. That's going to be coming due in February of 2021. We are updating the state's greenhouse gas inventory because, like I said, we want to be science-based. We want to know kind of where emissions are coming from and where the sinks are and things like that. So we know what our baseline is. That is going to be coming in mid-21, hopefully in the spring. And then we have a final report due in February of 2022. Just quickly, the interim report, as I mentioned, we are a little behind where we wanted to be because of the storm season we had this year. And so the interim report is going to be less of a initial strategy document. We don't plan on getting into any specifics on what we should or shouldn't do. This is going to be more of a roadmap document, kind of outlining for the public and for everyone involved in it, kind of what is the problem? What are the parameters of the climate risk for Louisiana? What are the mission and visions and the structures that are in place to address it? And then we do hope, after today's meeting, and maybe we'll be able to squeeze in one more, hopefully before February, to be able to have a good description of how this advisory group thinks that the economy should be used as a lens. So just a short description of how this group is going to operate within the larger context. And then, like I said, as a kind of a work plan for the next year, how are we going to spend that year of 2021 really coming up with a set of strategies that's going to move Louisiana forward. And so just to zoom back out to the entire process one more time, I just want to point out that we are not going to really jump into the solutions or strategies or policy recommendation phase until 2021. So we're doing a lot of process here at the beginning. We're doing a lot of groundwork. We want to bring everybody in. We want to understand how to work through these issues and how to think through these issues before we kind of call to both the public and everybody involved in it to kind of send us your ideas. So that's going to start in the winter of 21, that January, February timeframe. In the spring, like I said, we're hoping to get our greenhouse gas inventory update completed, and we're going to start refining these proposals, reviewing what's been coming out. This is where we'll be providing feedback to these other groups. By the summer, we're hoping to be able to put it together to really evaluate and prioritize some strategies, and then to start looking at some trade-offs analysis in terms of what's available. And then by the winter of 2022, approaching that February date, we want to be able to put out a draft strategy for additional public comment there, so we can kind of put it all in one place, and then have the public offer their thoughts. So that is a lot of the background and kind of where we've been so far. Are there any questions from the group so far?
Charles,
Sure.
What does the task force expect from us prior to the February 1st, 2021 report?
I think what we're going to go over today are called calling them fundamental objectives. And it's really going to be a product that's going to come out of today's meeting. I think that's the bare minimum. Is we're trying to identify and create one system for evaluating all the different strategies that are going to come out. We're purposefully doing a multi-stakeholder effort here, and so we're trying to get all these different stakeholders to identify what's important as we move through this process. So that will create our transparent way to kind of grade or score the different ideas that come through. And so today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about our sector, like what it is, what we think we should be talking about, and then identifying with this group what are some objectives that either the larger effort should take on, or just some things that are important specific to this economics lens that we're trying to apply. And then that will show up in the report. And so we're going to have the larger task force adopt a large suite of these objectives at their next meeting.
Okay. Then I have couple of other questions to add. First, obviously, a number of things that we might do could have impacts on various industries. Some of them could be negligible, some could be quite severe, and depending on how far we push in that situation. So that's one, the economic impact. Of course, there's also the impact if you do nothing, certain areas may have to just move away or something of that nature. But then the other side, are there things that are going to have to be paid for? That are there potential tasks that will take money, will take financing, public financing as well, is what we really are talking about here. Are we focusing on that as well?
I would say yes, but I would ask you to kind of ask that same question in like one slide where we kind of crack open this idea of the scope. I think those are all on the table, and I would love to get kind of you to kind of tell us how you want us to do that and how, to what degree, in this next discussion piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is
anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. This is more of logistics and how are we going to interact with the other committees and the task force? Is it that we, come to a conclusion and then there's a representative that interacts with them, or do we have an opportunity for all of us to connect?
That is a great question. That's something that we have been talking a lot about internally. We felt like it was a lot to ask for these members on this committee to have to split up and attend a bunch of other meetings on top of it. So we are really trying to create, that's still an open question a little bit, but so I think you are welcome to join as many other meetings as you want. We want to create, though, some guidance, formal guidance from this advisory group that will be adopted by the other committees as they go forward. We want to create eventually kind of we want them to know how we're going to basically score them before they, evaluate these proposals, and then we'll have a chance to actually evaluate the different proposals as they come to us. Whether or not we will need to kind of make special visits to certain committees or to kind of address some of these more holistic, bigger picture ideas with the task force, I think we want to be open to that, but I don't want to sign anybody up on this call for anything, on today that we don't know exactly how we're going to meet it. But I think that's a really good question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I think we should go ahead and move. Oh, please, yeah, Brad.
Charles. Yeah, this is Brad again. So what I'm hearing so far, and I had the same concern as Dr. Richardson did, given the short time between now and February, what is it exactly that this committee needs to provide for the interim report? And I think what I've just heard, and I'll try to spit it back out, is we probably need to provide some sort of operating template of how this finance advisory group is going to try to do its work. And that may be a combination of some guidance, I guess we would push down to the sector committees, and then this kind of scoring framework of how we're going to score the ideas that are going to bubble up from those sector committees.
And I think that's right, but I don't know that we are going to be able to get to the rubric side of this by February. I think our main goal is to really identify the essential characteristics that we're going to help be looking for, and that's something that's going to be adopted not just for this committee, and it's not just necessarily just going to show up as what the finance advisory group wants to say. It's going to be added to the full discussion that the task force as a whole will adopt. So I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't think that we're trying to get all the way to the template phase by February. I know that we're going to have we do want to have a second meeting and kind of get as far as we can on some of these items. So what I would add to what you said. So yes, I do think that being ready to offer guidance to the other committees as soon as possible is going to be good. But what we can do for the interim report is to kind of put some boundaries around what our committee is all about and not about, kind of back to Dr. Richardson's earlier questions, just what's on the table, what are some of the things that we want to do, both from the do nothing scenario and on the do something scenario. We want to kind of have both of those things going.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, so if that's okay, I just do think I think we can kind of open it up and start to kind of move into that direction. Just to kind of go back one more time again. So the 4 advisory groups are both going to provide information and assistance to the task force and the committees generally, and as requested on questions that transcend individual committee categories. So I guess that's a point I failed to emphasize so far, is that, you know, we don't want the task force to get to have a discussion just come to a complete halt because nobody can decide if there's a way to think about this or not, or, you know, on some kind of really specific economics, finance, workforce type of question. We want them to be able to say, like let's put a pin on that. Let's send it over to this group and let this group of experts kind of provide their best thinking on it, help us guide us in this one point. So that's going to be a role that we'll use this group for as needed. And then, yeah, and then we would do want us our prism to be applied in the different sectors. But I would say too that, you know, as Dr. Richardson was saying, if there are ways, if things need to be paid for, it might not be the job of the sector that is creating the opportunity or the incentive or the whatever it is that does the paying. There might be things that are happening in other sectors to either mitigate activities applying to another one, or, you know, we want to have the big picture view and not just think about one committee box at a time as well in this group. And so I started to kind of put together a sense of what topics could be, you know, in our scope. But this is a draft drawn up by somebody who is not even playing an economist on TV or you know, does not have the experience that this group has. So I really just hope that you guys take this and feel free to take it down or you know, put up as much a new thought here. And I'd love to hear kind of people's thoughts on where it is. And then some of these things have already been mentioned already. So the things that I kind of am starting the conversation with, and then I'll just open it up for discussion, is that we do want to look at the economic impacts of proposed policy changes, including the potential for growth or development of new economic opportunities that might be related to adopting policies or technologies. We want to help consider the larger economic and market forces that may be pertinent to policy discussions. And Stephanie, to your point earlier, the municipal market, that's kind of what I had in mind as one of those maybe things that might be out there that we should, you know, bring to bear. This group would help evaluate potential options for mitigating or overcoming potential negative economic consequences and or to help maximize the positive economic consequences of implementing certain policies or proposals. We do want to consider workforce implications for things that are happening. If we're going to go in a completely new direction, we want to be ready to meet the workers there. And then also to kind of think about opportunities within the world of finance to implement some of the proposed solutions. And I'm thinking about both the private side and on the public sector side. And those are just some early ideas, and I'm sure this group has got much better things to offer. So I would love to put myself on mute and just let you guys kind of have a little bit of conversation around some of these points.
So guys, yeah, I would welcome as robust of a discussion as we want to have at this point. So I'll go on mute and listen and try to take a few notes as well.
Thanks, Brad. And Charles, just, you know, might as well get it started. So when I look at your chart and you show in the lower left a two-way arrow between the sector committees and the advisory groups, it strikes me that what we might want to do is provide some overarching guidance to be a bit proactive versus just reactive to here's a policy, what's the impact? And the reason that I think about that one is in order to be efficient, you know, and I know you're doing the greenhouse gas emissions inventory as we speak. But if I look at referencing some stuff, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories inventories that are out there, the good news, if you will, is that Louisiana's greenhouse, or at least our carbon emissions, while high, are concentrated. 60% of our carbon dioxide emissions come from our industrial processes, and the states that are above us are coming from processes that will be much harder to impact, like transportation or residential commercial. So my point being is that if we can look at some macroeconomic to give them guidance to the sector committees to say, hey, your big bang for your buck are around industrial processes and decarbonization there. And here's where then it, it evolves into the financing part of that and how that can be done. So I just point and emphasize that I'd love to be able to give potentially some guidance in addition to being reactive.
Great point. Thank you.
And I guess, Pierre, can you get the concentrations down to particular industries? For example, I assume petrochemical industry would be a major part of that.
Jim, you're exactly right. And I know that you're quite familiar with my friend here, Eric Smith, who's been thinking about that. And of course, that's correct. That when we think about where they are, they're going to be fairly concentrated. And that's a strength of our state, the ability to process. So we want to not hinder that, but we can, like, again, as I point out, it's concentrated. Then we need to figure out how it's going to be financed if there's changes that need to be made there. But yes, we can, I think we can get that data and look at what the impact is.
Yeah, this is Stephanie. I think, as I was listening to the discussion, it seems to me there's two sides of this, which you touched on, Charles. It's not just how would we go about fostering the financing of any strategies that the state might want to focus on. It's also what's the cost of not doing it. And I attended that first meeting, and I believe I heard some of the statistics about that. And it is an area that I'm beginning to see an effect for local governments within Louisiana. I mentioned ESG, and the term green bonds has been around for a while. And so those are bonds that municipal investors buy that have a focus where the proceeds are used to finance what's considered a green project. And there are varying degrees of that. The vast majority is just that the issuer says, I'm going to use this for a green project, and it's considered green. The ability to fit that definition of green is becoming more stringent over time, but that they are still fairly lax, and there isn't a difference in a cost of capital for the issuer, whether they designate it green or not. The issue is becoming that, particularly for coastal communities, investors are beginning to exact a higher and higher interest rate associated with lending to those communities that they feel are at risk. It's something that I started to notice within the past 5 to 7 years, that certain market participants were becoming less and less willing to lend to Louisiana coastal communities. They are still able to access capital, but that cost may be going up. And it's a factor of not just increasing climate change, it's also increasing awareness on behalf of the investor community. And in particular, I'll highlight Standard & Poor's. Recently acquired, I don't know if you saw that in the news, IHS Markit. Their reason for acquiring IHS Markit in part was because of IHS Markit's data analytics. And in discussions with those rating agencies, they've said, we are going to focus more and more on what they call ESG, environmental, social, and governance. how is that local government or that state government or whoever's issuing that debt, how are they setting themselves up to be sustainable in the long term to environmental factors that may affect them and their ability to repay this debt that they're borrowing? How is their governing body set up to address these factors? And what are they doing from a social perspective to ensure that their communities are viable? So they are really focusing on these factors more and more. In addition to the rating agencies looking at it that way, investment groups, large investment funds, insurance companies, et cetera, they are also placing increasing focus on this. So in some ways, there are communities that have been redlined, or if they haven't been redlined, they've been targeted as needing to pay a higher interest rate because they are at greater risk. I do think that Louisiana is way ahead of a lot of the rest of the country with the efforts of Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, Water Institute of the Gulf, and some of the other initiatives that we've put in place because of Katrina and the recent effects that we've had with hurricanes, that other coastal communities are way behind us in really having looked at the data necessary to address this. So I think we have to look at both sides. What's the cost of not doing this? Because that's severe. It's not just the loss of the infrastructure that has been put into place and people's, assets that are at risk. It's the ability to sustain ourselves going forward and to be able to access capital to provide for those projects. It's that part, as well as how do we finance those strategies that will move us forward. And, carbon capture, I know, is one of those that I heard at that meeting as well. And there are, several different types of tax credits associated with carbon capture in different ways that you might address that. And so that's certainly an incentive that can help move those type projects forward. The state may consider doing a piggyback on top of that, or providing some other forms of financial incentive to move investors or lenders in that direction, in the direction that the state wants to go, whether it's in the form of guarantees, piggyback credits. There are ways that the state can move people in the direction that they want to go as well.
Stephanie.
I've talked for a while, so I'll stop.
Oh, that's great.
See what others have to add to that.
Is there on the carbon capturing, is there a committee working on that? Or
I think a couple committees are going to end up taking that one up. We have a committee for manufacturing and industry that I know will be interested in that. It could come up in a couple, maybe in, oil and gas might come at it too from that sector. So it is definitely one of the strategies that we have identified, and we're working with DNR as well as LED some on how the state can best position ourselves to kind of take advantage of that. So I think that's going to be one of the main focuses that comes out of this group. Not this group, but the whole effort. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Richardson, this is Brad again. I mean, I think you're beginning to see some private entities and the market itself move on some of these carbon capture initiatives. A project in Southwest Louisiana in October, filing for a federal permit. Again, I think what Stephanie was referring to at the federal level is this 45Q tax credit for carbon capture processes. That is really the big carrot for private entities to pursue this, along with the continuing advancement of technology. But I think the big picture potential is taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the ground, and hopefully improving the overall emissions profile of the state.
Mike Jackson, question. Say, for example, just I guess just a practical question in regard to the work of the advisory groups and as it relates to the task force. Say, for example, there's a perfectly good recommendation that comes from the task force and is vetted by an advisory group like this one. Yet there may be still questions in regard to the implication of what comes out or what's been vetted. Is there going to be some sort of some process where there's an economic analysis of the implications of some of these ideas, to the extent where that ideas are not discarded just based on the immediate economic impact, but maybe over the course of time there may be a marginal economic impact, and by the time that we get to 2025 or 2030 or 2050, we'd be able to, scale that impact in such a way that it won't be, devastating for our economy. Is there going to be some sort of economic analysis done by some entity to help support what comes out of the committee?
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. We are looking for both the tool and the resources to kind of do that across the entire initiative. We want to make sure that the strategies being proposed, we know how far they get us towards the goal. We want to be able to quantify that as much as possible. And we also want to be able to quantify kind of the economics that go along with that, whether that's, to be as industry specific as possible with that. We don't have that tool yet in our disposal, but that is one of our goals is to kind of get something on board to do that. The other thing, I had another thought to go with that, but I do think that's a really important question. We also, this idea of, the near term, economics versus the long term, that's something that doesn't really show up on this screen very much that you brought up. Oh yeah, that was what it was. So you're kind of asking, are we going to throw something out maybe because of its near term implications or its long term implications, or how will a perfectly good proposal, get scored badly? And our goal here, by going through the process that we're going through, is to be as transparent as possible with what all the different objectives are, so that we end up with a solution that we can look at it and say, like, well, we do know that it has, this consequence, whether it's good or bad. And then we can, if it's still the right thing to do, if it's still something that's necessary or moves us in the direction that we want to go in, maybe it checks all the other boxes except for this one that it just doesn't do. Then we can look for other policies or programs that maybe need to be paired with that, so that we can kind of alleviate the, whatever shortcomings those are, or something like that. So I think that we want to, in our different trade-offs analysis later in this process, we want to be able to look at, just like you said, what are all the different implications? What does the equity group have to say about this proposal? What are the different ways to look at this? And then so that when we make a decision, we're doing it with eyes wide open. I don't think we're going to arrive at any perfect policies or any single silver bullets as we come at this issue. So we want to be just as transparent as we can about what we can, foresee, as much as we can foresee as we can.
Alejandra, again, and this is to build up on Michael's questions, not really a process, but is there any previous work done to bank any studies or recommendations, even from international organizations, on the topic of reducing emissions? And if that's available, could we use that to support our discussion?
Thanks, Alejandra. We are definitely going to be relying on the work done by others as much as possible. But I think especially this group and all the groups, it's going to be about tailoring those ideas that have been tried other places to kind of fit the Louisiana context a little bit better. So maybe there's a way that we could do the same program that was done in Colorado, but ours would improve the resilience after hurricanes, and they didn't even think about that. Or there might be meaningful differences that we would want to add into it, and there might be meaningful differences that apply to our particular economic profile and the way that, as someone mentioned, if our emissions are coming mostly from industry, the program might need to be tweaked to kind of fit us a little bit better. So, but we do fully plan on drawing from the work of others. We're inviting a group to come in January to address the full climate task force, just to kind of just to do just that, just say, here's what's happening in other states. At least 26 other states are kind of actively involved in a process like this right now, or they've recently finished one, or maybe they did one back in 2008, 2010. And so we do want to learn from all of that.
I wanted to offer a couple of thoughts, just kind of looking at this scope. I think to me, this looks like a great starting point that covers a lot of what I had thought about related to this. Someone had already touched on this, that may have been Jim, thinking about the future without policy changes or without any renewed efforts to push Louisiana in a particular direction. And I just think that's something that I don't know that it's a separate item, but as we think especially about the first three bullets here, that we're just thinking as a group about that as the comparison, right? So it's the future and what certain industries might look like 10 or more years down the road, with or without these policies, and be careful that we don't default to what I think is common in the public discourse of comparing what the world looks like today with what a future with a policy might look like, and thinking about changes over time in that way. Related to that, I think in addition to thinking about the broad economic story, thinking about how economic costs and benefits are spread across the state, I think is important. I know when you think about this other group that's going to have this focus on equity, that picks up on some of those issues, but it's very much related to some of the work that I know we'll discuss. And I think in addition to a lot of equity questions, say race and gender and even across the income distribution, there are also regional and even kind of industry specific considerations that I think we should be thinking about. When I saw workforce, what immediately came to mind is the idea of how we can get people who might be negatively affected by changes that are accelerated by policies and retrain those folks for new job opportunities. But I think it's sort of a broad question that we ought to hold up alongside all of this analysis.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's something that's not really captured well on here at all right now. And is there anything else on the workforce side? We haven't talked a lot about that yet. Are there things that should be? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Charles. Yeah, I was just going to put an exclamation point on Stephen's comments. I thought those were really well put. And I would highlight that, particularly on workforce and how we bring down some of the economic opportunities down to the local level. I think the comment around sort of equity and sort of the disparate geographical impacts, either within cities or within regions of the state, is something that we pay a lot of attention to, obviously at the local level. One of the things that we've been trying to do at the City of New Orleans is try to connect some dots, not being overly complicated about it, but just think about where we know very broad strokes, where we know there's going to be some new economic throughput, and where we can be really intentional about connecting those dots around exactly what Stephen was saying around reskilling, credentialing, where we can kind of be pretty linear about creating those opportunities for folks, especially in a COVID context, obviously, but even hopefully as we move through it in the coming years. And I would just highlight, I think there's a lot of interest in this. Alejandra and her organization at NOLA BA in the city were just awarded a $5 million grant from JP Morgan Chase in recognition of the work that I think a lot of us, the groundwork has been laid. It's certainly not my novel idea, but just around the fact that we know, for example, and this isn't directly related, this is, I guess, more on the adaptation side, but where we know between CPRA and the Water Institute and the city's own NDRC dollars and the joint infrastructure settlement with FEMA, I know today that over the next 20 to 50 years, there's going to be a $20 billion spend in the water industries in Southeast Louisiana. I think the opportunities are there for us to create these pathways for connecting to workforce opportunities, connecting our small businesses to those spaces. And so, I think that's a really salient point, that as we think about what some of these prospective interventions are at the state level, just being really intentional about what the opportunities that might create on the workforce and economic development sides.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those points from Stephen and from Jeff. I think part of our challenge will be, and it's a challenge everywhere, but the timing, as we see certain types of energy jobs beginning to be in less demand, and we're seeing it now. How do we transition people to a job that's coming in the future, but it might not be here next month or next year? And so I think as we think about the retraining opportunities, the timeline and sort of the pipeline and syncing that up with the opportunities is going to be a really important piece of that. And we do have to bear in mind that a lot of those manufacturing and oil and gas sector jobs were much higher paying than the average salaries around our state, and replacing that with something comparable is also going to be important. It's complex with a lot of moving parts, but I think it's something that we need to be thinking through.
I wanted to add another thought related to workforce, and that, to be clear, this is something that I think is something we ought to bring alongside. I think the most acute focus should be on workforce, and especially to think about the timing issue. What are the more urgent things that we'll have to address first? But I think alongside that, there should, it's important that we bring some discussion more broadly about education, the K-12 system, and higher education generally, as we think about the whole concept of a long-term strategy to prepare people for tomorrow's economy. I know as I looked back at the 4 advisory groups, that wasn't something that necessarily was clearly under the umbrella of finance, but it relates to this. It may be at least a thought that gets brought up and discussed among some of the other groups as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. This has been really good. And I think I've heard from most everybody, so I'm going to move on a little bit. And the next discussion is very similar to this one, so I don't think it's going to shut anybody down. I think we're just going to try to put a slightly different angle on it. So if we could just move on right now, I'm going to give you guys another chance to talk once I kind of outline kind of this process piece that we're at now. So the final kind of main important thing to kind of for us to go over today is to kind of figure out how are we going to navigate all these different hard things at once? And I've kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I just want to kind of put some more detail on that. So, the question is, how are we going to meet these greenhouse emissions goals while considering vulnerabilities and economics, along the way? So this issue is extremely important for the future of our state, as I think we've all kind of identified and talked about, but it's also incredibly complex. And so, again, this structured decision-making is our effort to make this process as transparent as possible and keep it inclusive of all the different voices that are important to be heard in this conversation. And then also to end up with something that's got enough buy-in to be implementable. So this is kind of structured decision-making is the name of this process that we're using. And it also recognizes that no solution is going to be perfect for everyone involved. So this enables us to evaluate the unintended and intended consequences as openly as is possible. I mean, you can't know it all, but we're going to do our best to kind of put all the cards on the table as we go through these things. Basically, we are the basics of it is that we're going to explicitly articulate all of our objectives, including those that to target greenhouse gas emissions, but also include economic or social objectives as well. So where do we want to be as a state, at the end of all this process? We also want to be able to evaluate the solutions objectively against those goals using all the data that's available to us. And then third, we're trying to use those goals and help to evaluate the different trade-offs between some of the solutions that are proposed. So to kind of show the picture as a whole, there are these 6 big steps to it. We're really only talking about the first 2 today. We spent a lot of time just kind of, in the first task force meeting, did this as well, just kind of talking about the problem. So, climate change, what is the problem? How do these goals relate to the problem? The emissions reductions goals. What does that mean for Louisiana, which I think this group has already kind of taken on a little bit. And then the second piece is determining the objectives. And so this idea of determining objectives is trying to understand what concerns or values are important to people or organizations or industries as we work through the solutions to this problem. Structured decision making calls them objectives. You could think of them as goals or values or other words if they're more helpful to you. But they're intended to kind of give us some directionality. So to say that we're moving in the right direction, or if we don't hit this thing, or if we do hit this type of goal, that's a sure sign that we're moving in the wrong direction. Those are the kinds of big picture ideas we're trying to kind of get at in this. And so the other point with this is that today, we have a long process ahead of us, and we'll be seeing really specific proposals coming our way about how to do everything in a perfect way. We don't need to worry about the how today. We don't need to worry about whether we need a program for a certain type of worker or a training program for somebody else. The how is going to come through this process. We really want to stay at the high level as much as possible today about what are some of the characteristics of us moving in the right direction. So again, the executive order kind of really gave us the problem and the context that we're working on. It identified this duality, right, of our extreme vulnerability, but also this current economy that has to be considered. And then the other part of our context is just like we've kind of already started to allude to today. Here's just a snapshot from our previous inventory. So the data is from 2005. The inventory was done in 2010, and it just shows a couple things that yes, we're talking about greenhouse gases of all kinds, not just CO2. So it's got a way to kind of capture those. A lot come from fossil fuel combustion. Most of the greenhouse gas emissions are from combustion, but there are other sources that are producing these gases, and we want to be thinking about that as part of our context. And we also want to be recognize that certain industries are higher emitting than others, and that will be a bang for a buck kind of way to think about it if we want to go that way, as somebody mentioned earlier. But we also want to point out that even if your piece of the pie is not as big as others, there are good things that can come by thinking about all these different sectors, no matter their role in this. And so if there, like I said, if there are co-benefits that we can gain, or just everything we can do to kind of make the state more sustainable and more, the economy strong in the future, I think we want to be able to capture that as we go through. And so, kind of with that, that kind of problem case in mind. I do want to open it back up to you all to kind of talk about this idea of objectives. So again, we're trying to be as transparent as we can about how we should evaluate emissions reductions proposals. We want to hear what people care about, what matters as we move towards a low carbon future, which I think is where we're trying to go. What's important that we do or don't do. And ideally, I think even if you don't know if it's the phrasing we can work out later, and the details we have note takers on with us today. And so it's really just about trying to put some shape around this concept. This can be really concrete if that's where you want to approach it, or even more philosophical, and we can put metrics or concreteness to it later, I think. And I would say too that finally, I mean, if your organization or your background is primarily thinking about one sector or one piece of this pie, that's fine. Or if you want to have a suggestion that kind of would relate to the economy overall, or the big picture, that's really good too. So I've got 3 examples up here, and these are really just kind of broad, just examples for the sake of an example of what I mean by a fundamental objective. And so they're really just for you guys to take or leave, or I don't even know if they're helpful. I hope they are. But the first is obviously obvious and kind of basically part of the problem context is that we're here to try to reduce emissions associated with Louisiana's economic activity. If we're not doing that, we're not meeting any of the goals of the executive order, so we're not moving in the right direction, right? So the second one is tries to speak to the opportunity side of the equation. Just so how can we maximize the potential of making these transitions that are in front of us? And the third is kind of trying to speak to some of the outside forces that are kind of calling for climate risk to be evaluated more explicitly by local governments or even state governments or others. So can you, maybe a goal would be to preserve or improve bond ratings or reduce the cost of capital by addressing climate risk proactively, something like that. So with those examples just kind of up there, I would kind of ask Brad if you wouldn't mind kicking us off and kind of laying down your thoughts on this topic first, and then if it's okay, I might go to Stephen and Stephanie next, just to kind of just get some thoughts from some different angles, and then we'll open it up to everybody else.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I guess I'm kind of focused on that middle box, and I'm thinking about it more along the lines of positioning Louisiana for emerging opportunities. And again, we're just, I think, throwing a lot of things. If we were in a room together, maybe somebody would be on a flip chart capturing these ideas. But again, it's those new things in the future that people are talking about now, like carbon capture, like offshore wind. We don't quite have it defined. Maybe some private entities are beginning to move in the market. And how do we position the state for those opportunities? But I think we need to try to maintain, to the extent possible, the base of energy production that we have here, and technology is going to continue to improve, and those entities are going to probably do it better, and maybe things like carbon capture can improve the emissions profile of those operations. And again, just trying to get a handful of bullets that we can put down in this interim report that are transparent and at least provide a target for people to shoot at. But that's kind of, again, just spitballing kind of off the top of my head. And I know that there are many others on this call that can probably be a lot more eloquent than I've just been.
I think that works pretty good so far. Stephen, do you want to kind of pick up from there, and then Stephanie?
Sure. Looking at this slide and thinking about trying to boil down some of these thoughts to fundamental objectives, I would actually echo a lot of what Brad said. As I'm thinking about economic growth, a couple of things that I had thought about ahead of today's meeting was just trying to bring into focus or make sure that we're helping the rest of this effort to appreciate our role in the context of these broader trends, and that latter, the broader trends in consumer preferences and the national and international trends and changes in policies on the horizon are things that probably have the biggest influence of all on what Louisiana's economy may look like in the future. That's more kind of elaborating on what I think is a well put, concise objective in that middle box. But perhaps it's an addition to that, or maybe it is its own objective. I touched on this idea of thinking about the distribution of those economic opportunities. And that's kind of a dry economics term that can get at a lot of different dimensions, from kind of socioeconomic groups to more specific studies of the distribution of income across race and gender, as well as what we talked about already, regional issues, or even looking at specific industries or workers who may see new disruptions because of policies. But something about the distribution of economic gains, I think, makes sense to stand up as a fundamental objective. And I think
just to dig in on that concept, should it be distributed, in similar ways as what's now, or should it be based on, do you have more thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we can discuss as a group. I think that's ultimately something that our political leadership, guided by the voters, will figure out what that distribution should look like. Different states handle it differently. I would suggest as a starting point that a reasonable objective would be that economic growth, future economic opportunities, that Louisiana ensures broad access to jobs and opportunities to develop new businesses. That might be a way of establishing a good starting point. I'll leave it at that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
I'd like to add a suggestion too. For an objective, I would love to see something around identifying tools, particularly financial tools, that can incentivize industry leaders in adapting greener practices. And just to provide a quick example, in the construction and development industry, often creating energy efficient buildings becomes expensive. So there could be, as I said, financial tools that can help burden that cost. And there are many other examples across industries, but that's one particular example for the construction industry.
Thank you for that.
This is Brandon Nelson. Along those lines, I thought it was a great point. I'm hearing a lot of conversation about access to these opportunities, and we've utilized terms like small businesses and things of that nature. I don't know if it has to be part of the overall one, but I think when we kind of talk about the different demographics of those people that we want to make sure aren't left behind, that we truly kind of define it. For example, being a banker, a lot of times the things that I hear about difficulties in achieving DBE goals is because, the lack of being able to identify, DBEs that have the knowledge base, things that sometimes can only be achieved through, generational kind of knowledge being passed on. As I'm listening to you, to everyone kind of talk about these new jobs, these new positions, things that aren't even here yet, it seems like this is an opportune time as kind of a fresh start to make sure that people who maybe have historically been left behind aren't. This could be achieved in any number of ways, reaching out to, the HBCUs in the state, which we have several of them, to maybe kind of help them be on the forefront of providing this type of training and things of that nature. So that's kind of my biggest thing. I think it's definitely workforce. The 1 in 3 seems like it kind of requires a little bit of input from others, but I think the economic growth one is really something that I'd like to make sure that we truly kind of encompass those who, like I said, have historically maybe haven't had these opportunities despite, the efforts.
Thank you for that comment, Brandon. And can you just go back to that acronym you used a minute ago, just so I can be clear in the
HBCU historically?
No, not that one. The one before that, the one in banking.
DBE.
DBE.
Disadvantaged business enterprises.
Thank you. Enterprises is the word I couldn't come up with. Okay, thank you very much.
At the risk of just bringing up a number of different topics, there have been some great ideas surfaced here that I thought were worth expanding upon. It goes back to a point Stephanie started with, though, and this group might be the central focus of opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost of doing nothing and the cost that it might impact in some of our communities, or to Stephanie's point, where it drives the cost of capital so high, we get a lack of investment. So I would reiterate the point that we consider opportunity cost, whether it's damage, but also I'm a big believer in that middle box there being driven by access to capital. And if we don't do things that impact not just bond ratings for government entities, but frankly, corporate bond ratings, the cost of capital is going to go up, and we're going to shrink that opportunity for growth. So opportunity cost, I think, is important. And the other factor in investment, when we want to try to attract capital to make the changes we want to make, or for the training we want to do, is that an environment that reduces investment risk is important. And if we do see policies that are put forth that incentivize investment and attract capital, we need to think through how do we minimize that decision makers' risk in there relative to either the change of the policy and or, of course, the impact of doing nothing risk. So two different concepts. But you're seeing that reflected in cost of capital. Goldman Sachs reports that investment in renewable energy projects, cost of capitals are in the single digits, and cost of capital for long-term oil and gas projects are approaching 20%. So that's kind of a concept, though, around because of the risk. So I think I think our group can think through also the risk part of that would be my point. Oh, and one more thing that Alexandra mentioned about efficiency economics. When I hear from companies that think about investment, energy efficiency is a huge opportunity. I think 2/3 of the energy produced in the United States is rejected. It goes to waste. But it's interesting that companies don't invest a lot. Maybe there's not a growth opportunity in it. It's sort of a constrained return. And I don't know if there's something that in the finance group here we can think about to create incentives around efficiency investment as well.
To what Pierre's saying about cost efficiency, and of course I'll go with what Brad and Stephen said earlier on the growth thing, but we say new, and that's important because what comes with that is a change. For us economic developers out there that's on, feet on the ground, working every day with the industry, maybe some of these companies want to do it, just might not know how or what, or maybe there's opportunity there for an expanding business to come up with some of these methods or practices or apparatuses, call it what you want. But technology applied to a situation like this also creates, business opportunity. So, and so I'm even looking ahead to where, number one, my group's got to get re-educated in a lot of different ways. We're practically used to traditional economic development. This is jumping ahead and making it very aggressive. So there's a learning curve for us. There's training and workshops there internally. But the other thing too, though, is do we have the infrastructure to accommodate new ideas and technology and innovation? Do we have incubators that can handle that kind of thing? Do we have, where's the knowledge base, that we can draw from? I'm talking, yes, these other states, what are they doing? I get that. But where are they getting it from? But again, we're a state. How many times do we have to come up with our own apparatus to figure, to solve a problem? We're not alien to any new idea or let's try it out. People sometimes are crazy. We'll try anything, let's face it, we're people that literally live on the water's edge, okay? To survive in this environment, you better be creative, and can't wait always for somebody to come rescue you. So I think there's a lot of innovation opportunity here, a lot of business opportunity, a lot of investment opportunity. We talk about attracting investment. Investors like attracting in technology, something that's going to solve a problem, So I'm just throwing that out there, maybe something for us to kind of think about as we move along,
I'll just add on to the whole discussion about using the people that we have in place and their knowledge. I said before that I think we're ahead of a lot of the rest of the country with the amount of research that we've done and the amount of different strategies that we've looked at with both CPRA and Water Institutes of the Gulf about how to deal with living on the coast and the water that comes from the Gulf as well as what comes from rain events. That we have a lot of information and the ability to deal with the effects of both storm surge as well as inundation, from rain. I think we have a lot of very knowledgeable people on the ground that are dealing with that. And how you deal with it depends on where you live on the Louisiana coast. For example, how Terrebonne might deal with it is very different from how Lake Charles deals with it because their topography is different. And so I think, what CPRA and the engineers that work with them know and the projects that they're putting into place, that's a huge amount of information, a very valuable resource. And I honestly don't know how much interchange of that information has happened between them and universities, community and technical colleges to make sure that that knowledge is passed on. And so that the emerging companies or companies that exist that want to transition to a different area from just dealing with, pipe fitting or whatever that they're doing, to be able to deal with some of these emerging industries, they have the knowledge to be able to do that. And so hopefully that is one of the things that the state can invest in.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think Vic, for one, is on the case right now on that issue and some others, but I think that's a good place to keep pushing us to go. Does anybody else have any other thoughts?
Yeah, very quickly, Mike Jackson, and I hope I'm not just restating what other comments have brought out, but as it relates to creating a climate for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and I think that there's an opportunity to incentivize it and by way of state contracting, including language and state contracting, and in our relationship with local governments to find ways to incentivize the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the work that we do, and ultimately creating a climate whereby the reduction of emissions becomes the standard. And that is promoted from the top, from state government, but communicated to business and also to our local government.
I think we're slowing down a little bit on some of these coming through. Today is not the only day you have to think about this. If you want to just kind of, as you mow your grass or walk the dog, if you want to just kind of reflect on this conversation, and if you have any ideas, you can definitely send them in to me or to climate@la.gov at any time, and we're going to get these kind of consolidated, cleaned up. We're going to add them into the mix of some of the other groups and make sure that we've got everything captured on here. So again, just kind of in terms of wrapping up, today we just really wanted to look at this context for what we were doing, both the problem side, what this group needs to be focused on, and then what are some of these objectives that are going to be really important to kind of help guide these other committees and the task force as a whole through this. Like I said, we have plenty of time to talk about the means and the specific, what does that incentive need to look like? What is that, what is it, the details will come later on through this process. And two, I would just point out that this number 4 here, so these advisory groups are going to work slightly differently than some of the sector committees where they might be meeting more often, throughout the year as they're kind of trying to develop these recommendations in the first place. But we're really going to be active in this this 4th step where we're evaluating the alternatives, trying to think about the consequences analysis, just as it was mentioned today, both those opportunity costs and the cost of doing nothing, the cost of doing this thing, and that's going to be a major part for this group as we move forward. So that's a little bit further down the road from where we are today. I think we have at least one more meeting of kind of a groundwork setting, so we can kind of get these tools in place, so we can kind of get them in front of the other groups. So they can know kind of how we think they should be thinking through proposals as they develop them, and then we'll be kind of coming back in. It's around step 4. And so again, with the next steps, here's kind of our timeline that we've got just for the next to the interim report. The second task force meeting, we are so first of all, this is the first meeting of this group. All of these sector committees and advisory groups are having their first meeting. We started last week, and we're going to be wrapping up next week so every group will have met one time before the second meeting of the larger task force. And we're all having very similar conversations. What is our group all about? And then what are our fundamental objectives? Those are our main points. The second task force meeting, we're hoping to hear from the committee chairs. We'll kind of offer up for the benefit of the task force and the public kind of a sense for what was discussed in all the different committees in a very short way. And then hopefully we'll be able to approve at least a draft version of this global set of objectives that's going to kind of help us guide all of this work moving forward. And then so the next thing that we'll do is kind of start diving in a little bit more into some of the opportunities and challenges and a little bit more process. But that will probably happen in January after the holidays. And I've got a little work to do before then to kind of take what we learned today and figure out exactly the next step for us. But I am going to create, again, if you think of something that you consider to be a fundamental objective, after this meeting, please send it to me, ideally by Friday, but it's okay if it's not by Friday, but just in the near term. And then we are going to create a drive to kind of share resources, kind of to Alejandra's point. A lot of things are being done right now in different states and around the world. If you've seen something that's really effective or you think would be a good fit for Louisiana, I do want to provide the space for us to kind of collaborate there. And then we're also going to be open to looking for any gaps in the knowledge. If maybe you don't think of a fundamental objective after this meeting, but you think of a big area that we didn't talk about, we want to be able to go there. So that's kind of what our next steps are. Just to reiterate, we are holding as public a process as we can do, given the public health emergency that we're under. We have a website. The public can send in comments to climate@la.gov. There's a web address up here on the screen now where you can find meeting materials, kind of overview documents, schedules. And you can sign up to be on a mailing list too. So I would say if you have any colleagues who are interested in this, but aren't on one of these groups, please direct them to that. They can be kept informed about what's happening and what's coming next. And then so finally, we are going to move into the public comment period for this meeting. Again, people have been able to send in emails, and I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a minute and look at my email. And then I might ask Brad if we could take just like a 2-minute break and allow the public, there's a little bit of delay on the YouTube feed for them to kind of realize it's their turn, get their thoughts together and hit send. So if everybody we can, just stay on the line, but you can, mute for a moment while we let public comment come in, and then we'll take that and then we'll wrap up. So actually, let's just put a time limit on that. Let's come back at 2:45 exactly. I've got 2:42. We'll just give 3 minutes there, and then we'll be ready. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have not received any comments over the email, so I think that we are able to kind of close this meeting out. I just want to, just before I hand it back over to you, Brad, I just want to thank everybody for being on today. This is a really great discussion. I know we threw a lot of background out at you, and you guys really came up with a lot of great ideas. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with this whole group. But I'll turn it back over to Brad to officially close this off.
Yeah, Charles, I'll just echo what you said. I do appreciate everybody's participation. I am very grateful for the robust discussion that occurred over about a 60-minute period. As you can see, I think an issue like this has got a lot of facets to it, a lot of angles to it. And I am more than happy over the next week or so to try to participate with you, Charles, or any other committee members on a kind of a wordsmith kind of exercise, see if we can nail down a handful of these fundamental objectives in a written form and get it back out to everybody to maybe look at before the end of the year. So when we come back after January 1st, again, maybe we can hit the ground running. But I think it just also speaks to the overall, we do have a lot of work to do, but it's important work. And I appreciate everybody being willing to go on this journey. So thanks for everyone's time. I certainly wish everyone a very safe, a very happy Christmas, holidays, New Year's. Still, let's be aware of the COVID environment that we're in, and make sure we're doing everything we can to keep ourselves safe. So with that, I am happy to accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Vic. And thanks for everybody's time. And I'll call this first meeting of the Finance Advisory Group to a close, and look forward to being with everybody again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Merry Christmas.